Hey there, and welcome to Section 3, Exposure Correction. In this section, we're basically going to be adjusting the lights and darks for all of our images. Chances are sometimes your images just come out a little bit light or a little bit dark. So we're going to be looking at shadows, midtones, and highlights for the images. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to click on our first image here, D for the Develop module, and for this entire section, we're going to be sticking around here in this tone area. Alright, so this is what we need for our exposure right here. Okay, now chances are your exposure is probably not that far off. If your image looks like that, obviously you need to change your exposure. But if I bring my exposure up a little bit brighter, we can see, well, a little bit looks pretty good, but we start to lose a lot of detail you can see in the face and things like that. So in this case, we'll bring our exposure up just a little bit. There we go. Now, contrast, we can bring this up or down, and a lot of this is kind of like, hey, are you just kind of clicking these sliders and dragging them left and right and seeing what looks good? And the answer is kind of yes. That's like pretty much what you do, because every single image is different, right? Like I can't tell you to just punch in these values and all your images will work. It's going to really depend on every image that you do. All right, so our highlights. Now what I can see is basically I want to get my background as bright as possible. I want to bring up my highlights just as long as it's not affecting what's going on here in the skin. I don't want to start blowing out any detail in the skin. Alright, now if I bring shadows up a little bit, it's going to kind of open his face up a little bit, make his skin look a little bit lighter. If I bring my shadows down, it's going to kind of bring skin a little bit darker. So we're going to choose somewhere that looks really nice on our background without going too light. There we go. Whites I tend to leave alone for the most part because they tend to do like really weird funky stuff to an image, especially with skin. They tend to turn skin that like orangey color. So if you do want to bring your whites up a little bit, I would just say do that just a little bit. Alright, and your blacks you can make a little bit brighter as well, or you can make it a little bit darker. For the most part, I leave those blacks about where they are. Alright, and that looks pretty good. Alright, G for our grid view. Let's go ahead, you know what, let's go ahead and see the before and the after we did that. Alright, so here's the before our exposure adjustments, and then after. Just looks a little brighter and more open. Okay, next image, let's hit D for the Develop module. Alright, we're going to bring our highlights up a little bit. There we go, and we're going to bring our shadows up a little bit as well. Alright, let's keep those whites where they are. And our exposure. There we go. That looks really nice. So, go back to our grid view, and now we can pretty much assume that we're going to be using the same settings for this image, and this image. So let's hold down Control or Command, and I'm going to click on those three images, and now we're going to go to Sync Settings. You'll notice they're going to sync to the lighter one. This is a little bit lighter of border than these two. They're going to sync to that one. So we'll go to Sync Settings, and now I'm going to click on Basic Tone, which is going to turn all these on, and we're going to go to Synchronize. There we go. And it lightened those images, and well, just made them look better. Alright, cool. Moving on to the next set of images. So with this sort of thing, you can see it's definitely like on a per image basis. There we go. For this image in particular, I want my background to be bright, but I don't want that to make her skin so bright that I'm losing all my detail. So this may be one of those cases where I just have to make the background brighter in Photoshop, which is not a big deal. Bring our shadows up a little bit, see more detail there in the darks. Alright, and there we go. Alright, that looks great. So G, back to grid view, and then I'm going to command click on, well, let's try all the way to here. Basically what I want to do here is spend as little time as possible. So if I can take care of all these images with a white background, I'm going to try it. So we're going to hit Sync Settings. Okay, we want to sync our white balance. Okay, we want to sync our lens corrections, and we want to sync our tone. So let's go ahead and see how that looks. Now it might not have worked really well on everything, but those that it didn't work very well on, we can go back and adjust. Actually, I think it did a pretty good job on everything, except for these are a little bit too bright. So let's hit D for the Develop module here. Go to our exposure, and I'm just going to bring this down just a little bit. Basically, the background looks great here, right? It's like, oh, pure white background, you did it. But I can't see any detail in her skin, and her skin is a lot more important than the background. I can always make the background lighter. That's not at all hard to do. But I do want to see all the detail in her skin without any of it blowing out. Alright, so there we go. Now we'll click. That one looks pretty good. Let's just see if our shadows can come up a little bit. Alright, and you know what? I like that, so I'm going to bring my shadows up on this one too. There we go. Shadows, make the shadows light and dark. Sometimes I feel like explaining this is like, well, you see what it's doing, right? So just continue to do that. Alright, basically the goal is make sure you can see details in your highlights, midtones, and your shadows. And if you can, you're doing a good job. You're on your way. Alright, let's click on this photo. D for develop. You can see our shadows are just a little bit too dark, right? So we're going to bring our shadows up a little bit, which helps us give us more information on our subject's face. Alright, and highlights looked okay. There we go. Alright, that doesn't seem to be helping, so I think we're pretty good. You know what, bring our shadows up just a little bit brighter. Alright, let's Command click the two of those to sync. There we go. And so you can see I'm basically doing this per group of photos. Let's bring our shadows up a little bit there, and our highlights down just a little bit. That actually looks great. So let's go back to our grid view by hitting G. We're going to sync all those. Alright, now we click on the first image from the next group of pictures here. And I'm going to bring my highlights down because you can see a lot of information was kind of like lost. I don't see a whole lot of detail in her forehead, so by bringing the highlights down, I'm able to see more detail in her forehead, which we definitely want. Alright, and let's go ahead and bring our shadows up there a little bit too. Alright, looking great. G for the grid view. Command click the two of those and we'll sync those together. Alright, and then here on our last set of images, we're going to bring our shadows a little bit brighter and our highlights down just a little bit. Let's bring our blacks up as well. Alright, that looks great. Again, I'm not so concerned with the background. Background is secondary to my subject, right? Does this look good? Can I see detail all around her face? Is my white balance okay? You know, those are the things that are important. What's going on over here? I don't really, I don't have much concern for that. Alright, let's hit Command, click on the two of those, sync settings, and there we go. We'll sync that one as well. Alright guys, so you can see our images look really, really good now. We'll just click on one of these. We'll see the before. So this is straight out of the camera, and that's after a little bit of Lightroom. And you know what? I think we could even bring the highlights down a little bit more. Alright, cool. So that's the end of this section. Basically, we just want to get everything, our exposure right between our lights and our darks. Now, in the next section, we're going to be going over color, basically working on our vibrance and any adjustments we need to make with some hue. Alright, we'll see you guys in the next section.